It is absolutely legal if you're a U.S. citizen currently to experiment on this without consent. We actually, this is why we're out here educating the population. We have a URL called stop3024.com, and we're asking for everyone to sign that. We would have expected we'd have 1 million signatures by now, but we don't. But the reality is that this is happening right now before our very eyes. And we can go deep down the rabbit hole about what this technology does. Back in uh, 1994, November of 1994, there was a 21st Century Cures Act. It was a declassified document that was obtained through a FOIA request. And on page 89, this is to keep the United States Air Force a superpower 50 years into the future. On page 89 is a chapter called Biological Processes of this report. And in it, it talks about using RF technology to remotely influence the human body, affecting our biochemistry, our thought processes. And in it, it says with this tech that they can erase memory sets and imprint memory sets. That means that they can take a copy of someone's memory sets that has a certain attribute that they want to institute in others, so they can imprint it in others with this tech. And they can erase memory sets. Now, people say, well, that sounds very sci-fi, but it's in there. You can read it. It's in black and white. Go back to 1972 in California. Our correctional institutions are notorious for experimenting on prisoners. We have another document from our United States Congress Senate that talks about modifying human behavior. And in 1972, at Vacaville Prison, not only then were they able to remotely monitor your biometrics, that means your respirations, your heart rate, your temperature, your blood pressure, but in the section, it also says remotely read your thoughts. So that was in 1972. Now, in 2013, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ido Bachelet who gave a TED Med talk in Israel. And he's holding up a syringe. He says, I just brought this syringe from my lab, and just at the tip, not the full scale of the syringe, he says at the tip of this needle was 1,000 billion robots. Nanorobots is what he was talking about. They're 50 nanometers in size. That's 2,000 times the width of a strain of a human hair. You can never see it. It would be invisible. But what these robots can do and can self-replicate, they can self-assemble, they can cross the blood-brain barrier, they can attach to your DNA. And he teaches his students, and he's saying this in the presentation, how to control these things once they're in the host with an Xbox controller. That is what we're dealing with now. This is basically computer programming of nanoscale technology that we are now discovering that we know that in studies has shown that it has been in the Pfizer vaccine and the mRNA vaccine. It is also in the xylocaine derivatives. You can, in the demonstration that we sent you, you can see Dr. Ido Bachelet's nanorobots next to the xylocaine derivatives, and they're identical. You can look at what's in the studies that show what they were pulling out of the vaccines. You can see that they're identical. So the bottom line is, what can be done with this tech? If you're able to do these types of things, and what is meant to happen in the future for our society, our children to come, our genealogy, it is not a good picture if we don't stand up and say this is not okay, has never been okay, and that we've been hijacked, and this was done without our consent.
Maybe we can just, before we get more into the COVID vaccine piece of this and these detectable signals and what these things actually are, maybe you can wind the clock back a little bit here briefly and kind of walk us through the Havana syndrome piece of this and how you were first uncovering, because we've had people say, oh, it's just people being crazy. And we've had whistleblowers who've come forward and told us that they've gone through this. They've been targeted. We've had former members of the CIA telling us that they were specifically targeted with directed energy weapons, affecting their children, affecting their entire family. But maybe you can talk about the beginning when you first discovered that there was something nefarious going on with Havana syndrome.
Okay. So Havana syndrome is a recent term. Okay. How I first became aware of this is this happened to someone who was close to me, my son's mother. I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall in San Antonio, Texas, back in 2010. He was the author of a book that he had just released called Satellite Terrorism in America. Coincidentally, he wrote that book based on the same phenomenon happening to his fiance. So when I met him, he was telling me how he was meeting U.S. citizens who were talking about hearing this strange signal that was being transmitted to them, followed by short-term, long-term memory loss, brain fog, severe headaches, vertigo, nausea, vomiting, but more specifically, electrical shocks through the torso, which is now defined as buffeting. Okay. Now, these individuals are truly being tortured and affected 365 days a year, 24/7. It is completely debilitating. And what Dr. Hall was doing was utilizing a general frequency detector, scanning people to see if they can detect anything around their person. And they were coming up positive. And I had said to him, well, isn't that enough to go to the general practitioner and get further diagnostics? He says, no. As, as soon as they go and they say they hear auditory symptoms, he says they are being forced institutionalized and forced medicated. And he says they're being re-victimized. And I said, well, my background as a firefighter paramedic and being involved in IRBs and studies and looking for objectivity, I said, well, there's got to be a way to take this subjective complaints and turn it into objective data. So that's when I decided to call that meeting in Sacramento, California. When 100 people showed up, I said, we have something. So I decided to start doing mass scanning in the field in conjunction with obtaining survey data to see who was most affected by this. And the data started to paint a picture. 300 people showed up at our first event in Davis, California. And what the data was showing is the persons most affected by this during that time were Caucasian females, recently single, widowed, or divorced, highly educated, then Caucasian males, in the same sequence, African Americans, Asians, and then Hispanics. And it dwindled down in ethnicity from there. And I go, is this some type of attack on Caucasians? Because we went to the Midwest and the same exact data happened, same picture. It did change when we got into Chicago, where African American and Caucasian flipped, where African Americans became number one and Caucasians were number two. And that stayed consistent to the East Coast, except for one anomaly, which was up in Virginia. I was invited by a bunch of military subcontractors who were all having these same complaints. And they found out about my work and they said, can you please come and scan us? That ultimately took me to Europe. I was invited by a government agency to test their diplomats. And for me to bring anyone who I felt sure was suffering from this phenomenon. They allowed me to use a research facility, test these individuals in a Faraday cage, anechoic chamber, which is a robust Faraday cage, and it was rated to block out frequencies between 8 kilohertz and 19 gigahertz. The frequencies we were detecting out in the field were well within that. So we used controlled people, which our frequency counters read 0 for the first time ever. So we knew we were in the right environment. When we brought in those symptomatic individuals, we were detecting frequencies. So it was at that point we conclude, for whatever reason, these frequencies are emitting from the human body. Ultimately, that led to the Bonnie Kellerby cases where they started doing surgical removals, finding these biosensors. Now, in 2016, which is far further, in the future from 2010, it was recognized, but from our diplomats and our FBI agents and CIA agents and congressional members, Colonel Eggering testified that this is happening to all of them, but they're saying it only happens to federal employees. We know for a fact that this has been happening, at least we've been documenting since 2010, to U.S. citizens here in the United States. Why else would the head doctor of a 3-letter agency contact me and tell me, you and Dr. Hall kind of Renaissance men, and you're absolutely correct. There's significant overlap between the 338 federal employees that he's treating for Havana syndrome and our clients are the same. He said the only difference is that you are surgically removing biosensors. Tell me more. Tell me more.
So I have so many questions. It's not just affecting federal employees, as you've documented. It's affecting average Americans, white Caucasian women, newly single, widowed men, white Caucasian men in that strata. And have you been able to trace back the moment when this started? An injection, some sort of a doctor's visit, some sort of a vaccine? I mean, how is this getting into their bodies, or does it have to be injected into their bodies?
Very good question. So a little bit about the history in a very short amount of time. Back in the 1940s, the U.S. military was implanting our soldiers with RFID chips the size of a large grain of rice. Into the 80s, early 80s, it became a small grain of rice. Late 80s, they were now approaching the size on a letter of a penny. Okay? That has, and you're lucky if they can be identified on any type of medical imagery, because that can surgically be removed. What we noticed is post-COVID, I started getting just inundated by calls of people saying that they're suffering from this, and there was a huge spike. So when we were scanning people back then, maybe on average 4 to 7, 4 to 8 locations, high side was 10. Now post-COVID, when we're scanning people, the average is about 20 locations that they're lighting up. They're not random, they're very specific and very predictable. Back in the early 2010s, if you were incarcerated and we scanned you, we already knew you were incarcerated just by the pattern that was developing. We could superimpose all those over each other and they were identical. We can take soldiers, those who were in the military who are coming up positive. Their pattern was slightly different, but you can superimpose them over each other and they were identical. Then you can take the general population and their patterns were identical.
So just so I understand correctly, I'm sorry, you're blowing my mind here, but like you could look at those who were prisoners and they had a similar pattern. You could look at soldiers and they had a similar pattern. And you could look at the general population, the mom that goes to Trader Joe's in the afternoon, and she had a similar pattern to another mom that goes to Trader Joe's in the afternoon. Am I understanding that correctly? I know I'm dumbing it down a little bit, but is that?
That is exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. And there were a couple of anomalies, but when we found an anomaly in an unusual location, they said they always had a surgical procedure. Now,
can I jump in really quick with a question? So does sure. Every human give off some sort of signal, but you're just getting a certain pattern with the ones that are infected, or others give no signal whatsoever?
No, back prior to COVID, it was not unusual to scan someone and they came up with no detectable signals. Just nothing. What we've discovered recently, post-COVID, everyone is coming up positive in the exact same locations that we were detecting prior to COVID of those who are symptomatic. So I had a software engineer recently who insisted that I test his 3-year-old and 6-year-old. He was so vigilant and so demanding that I do it, and he didn't tell me why. And I finally agreed after getting permission from both parents to do this. And when I scanned those 2 little children, they came up identical as the adults. I was shocked. And it was, and quite frankly, I was a little upset. Not more than a little upset, I was pissed off.
Yeah, because they're using children. I mean, that's why no way in hell I would ever put this in my children, right? I mean,
yeah,
no way. But a lot of people did. A lot of people were like, yeah, I want to give as many shots as I can, and many of these COVID shots and boosters and anything I can to shove into my children. It's devastating.
What this engineer did not tell me is he built a Faraday cage in his home, and he did RF testing on his children inside the Faraday cage, and they were coming up positive. And so he wanted my expertise in order to verify what his findings were. And he never told me what he did until after I did the testing. And then I understood why. And so it was then that I said, we need to continue to start testing the general population now. And I just came back from the UK from I was there for 3 weeks. We were doing some human testing on people who are non-symptomatic, but have had the jab. And what we're finding is the exact same thing. They are all lighting up now. We're not finding what we did back in the early 2010s, where it would not be unusual to find someone who came up negative. So what this is, our hypothesis now is those who are symptomatic are turned on. Those who are non-symptomatic haven't been turned on yet. And there is an article put out by Scientific Neurology, which is also in that presentation that we sent to you. And I encourage everyone to get a hold of this article. It's called Surgical Neurology International, and it was put out by Dr. Fabian de Roulet, he's PhD, and he really talks about the whole spectrum of this program. This is all the reason we think those are symptomatic right now. Those are the beta tests, and we're probably in a new form of war. The United States has this tech. The UK has this tech. Russia has this tech. China has this tech. India has this tech. Okay.
A new form of war. We'll have a link to this article in the description. Do you think that this, so when you then, I mean, you're just studying human patients, and you're looking at this cross section of these Americans who are having these symptoms. Do they have some sort of political beliefs that are all in unison? You know, are they all, you know, that's what my brain immediately goes to. They were all at, like, you know, supporters of Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? Like, what anything common there that you've then analyzed?
Well, no. I think when you read that report, the Surgical Neurology International, it talks about how microwave frequencies are being utilized as a weapon of war. It talks about the 5G. China, yesterday, we just read an article, they just turned on their 6G. And in it says in the 6G, they have the ability to read and manipulate the human brain with it. Okay. This is what we're facing. If you have this nanotech in you, you are no longer considered human. There's a new term for the human species, Homo borgenesis. And my question to this, if this was basically imposed upon us without consent, and you're no longer considered human, the debate is going to come at some point here. Just like they gene-engineer, you know, crops, and they patent it. Now, are you a patentable item? Are you still covered by human rights if you're no longer considered human? This is what we're facing. When Putin said that the superpower to master psychotronic weapons, how powerful a weapon can this be if you can imprint memory sets upon what I call demographical biospheres, bubbles across the United States, get them to believe one thought process versus another, divide and conquer? That is what's being implemented on us. It's important that we educate everyone so you can get in tune with your internal true self, your internal spirit, your true moral compass. You know what that is. Once you are aware of this tech and you start to get influences that are not common to yourself and you can identify that, this is part of the battle. But really what we all need to do is bind together. Because if we do not stop this now, just think about this. Before, it only took 50 years to change a generation's perspective. Now, with the advent of AI, supercomputing, quantum computing, Moore's law has been superseded. It has been broken. Instead of seven years, we're now exponentially increasing our technology. And when we're integrating AI into this, and Dr. Giordano, who was a world-leading expert on this technology, completely talks about AI being integrated with this. Elon Musk says that we're creating an AI god. There's a command and control video that we sent you. It's important that you show that to the listeners, because ultimately that is what they're trying to implement. Total control, total slavery. You don't conform. You're digital resources are cut off from you. You can't buy food, water, you can't pay bills. You can't access any monetary anything in order to buy anything because you just aren't following the system.
The Central Command Platform gives key decision makers easy access to advanced surveillance options. Using the icons at the top, we can toggle the visibility of the subjects we want to view. We'll tap the human icon to activate their visibility. This gives us a real-time view of all the subjects in our jurisdiction. Let's use the search bar to find a specific subject. Here, we can search by typing in the name of a subject or search with an image of the subject's face. First, let's try typing in the name of our subject. In this case, there were 2 people with the same name found in our jurisdiction. We can tap a subject's live location to see more details. We can now see the live location and source details of the person we tapped on, with options to see more details to help us determine if this is our subject. To search by face, let's say we have an image of the subject. We can source this from a surveillance integration or by manually uploading an image. Using face search, we can find the exact person who matches the face of our subject. Let's say our subject is suspected of committing a crime last night. We can use the AI chat to see where he was at the time of the crime. The chat will respond and show us the exact location on the map. Let's say we have a crime report that tells us the suspect fled the scene at 9:30. Let's use the timeline tool to go to exactly 9:30. We can see that it matches the report. He's leaving the bar. Let's see where he is right now by using the timeline tool to go back to live. We can use the chat to automate the next steps, such as requesting an arrest warrant and sending units to the area once we receive it. The chat will automatically create an action plan and execute the plan for you as soon as you give the approval. It'll notify the relevant parties, execute according to your department's protocol, and custom integrations with your current services, allowing you to keep your jurisdiction safe and secure right from the palm of your hand with the Central Command Platform.
That is what they're facing, and this is why it's important that we share this.
Man, it sounds like the Matrix, you know, you're
Yeah.
plugged in. I mean, it's unbelievable to me. The idea that someone somewhere at a dashboard is saying, we're going to flip on, we're going to flip these individuals on right now in Memphis, Tennessee. Over here in Salt Lake City, there's a group of 100 individuals. We're going to turn those guys on today, and they're going to start to experience these symptoms. I mean, it sounds insane.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and after hearing this, a lot of people are going to wonder, am I infected or whatever? Like, is there a way people can know, like, themselves? Because they're going to, like, after they see this, they're going to be freaking out. Like, what can they do to know that they are infected?
Well, Doctor, there was a Trojan horse that was instituted upon a global society. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny recently disclosed a video where she was disclosing that in the PCR testing, that hydrogel, this graphene oxide, a lot of this nanotech was instituted in that. You know, not everyone took the vaccine, but I would argue that the majority of the globe was forced to take the PCR test. You were forced to take a COVID test. Otherwise, you couldn't see your children's basketball game. You couldn't, go out in public and events. So this was forced upon all of us.
So it was in the PCR tests, not even in the COVID.
In the hydrogel.
In the hydrogel.
Hydrogel, yeah. Not in addition, what they're finding in the vaccines, there's no hiding that, and they're finding in this anesthetic derivative xylocaine. So anytime you've been numbed, go to a dentist, that you cannot get a xylocaine derivative or lidocaine derivative right now that does not have the nanotech in it.
So even just going to get a simple blood test right now, just having them numb the area before a blood test, you could be receiving these nanoparticles?
Absolutely. So I'm working with a very talented group of people. Just like Ido Bachelet teaches his students how to program these things, we believe if we're able to establish the protocol that they're utilizing, that we can come up with a solution, basically a cure to make these things inert. But it's going to be a back and forth battle. Once you find out a way to stop it, then they're going to find a way to reintegrate it again. And this is going to be a consistency that we foresee in the near and far future. Right now, the best thing that can be done, like I said, I've never stood behind anything until recently. The Zeolite Z product that is out there, that's basically all natural Mother Earth. It's a negatively charged mineral that's created when you have volcanic activity in sea, and in blue zones, that's the best place to get it, and they source it from. But what we're finding is that those who are symptomatic, like I said, both in intelligence agencies and the victims that I normally see, are saying 50 to 70% reduction in their symptoms. And they've done testing, blood testing at initial levels at control, seeing the graphene oxide peak after taking it, which is what you expected because it's being excreted out of your body. And then after 90 days, it levels down to at least a minimal tolerable level. Right now, it's a Band-Aid, but it is some type of solution to help. What we are finding in the general population of the non-symptomatic people, those who are coming up positive in the least locations, 3 or 4, which is something that I rarely see now, are those who live outside of cities, suburbs, in very distant locations, live a very organic life, haven't had the vaccine, just live a completely healthy lifestyle. For whatever reason, those are the ones who are coming up positive in the least locations. We're currently working on trying to find cultural groups who are very isolated, like the Amish, and we're working on trying to start testing them to see, because you asked, how's it get in you? The larger tech was with an injection or some type of medical procedure. With the nanotech, we know that an injection is a modality for it to be in you, but it's also in our foods. It's being marketed in the cosmetics as the next greatest way of marketing things. And we still haven't figured out why those who live out in distant, remote areas are still coming up positive in at least 3 or 4 locations. That would mean it's either in our water or it's in our air.
And of course, Dane Wigington, a friend of the show, Dane Wigington, of course, who has followed the particles that are being sprayed in our skies through cloud seeding programs and all of the other work that he's done on that, and the aluminum in the air and everything else that they're blasting into the air with these sky chemtrails or whatever else you're seeing in the sky. Maybe that explains it, but of course.
Well, and also the control they have on all the farmland now. Like they control all the farmland. So like we don't even know all the entry points at this point.
Yeah, we're constantly bombarded. So at least with the Zeolite Z, it at least keeps it down to a minimal level where you minimize, and it excretes the graphene oxide as well as other toxic metals. But graphene oxide specifically amplifies RF signals. Okay. Basically, our health systems have been weaponized against us. That is what's happened now. And each and every human being who has this in them, this nanotech, is a node. You are connected to the internet. Each and every one of us is a transmitter and a receiver. Now, remember, again, when you read that New World Vistas report on page 89, and even go further to the other report that talks about them being able to remotely read your thoughts back in 1972, this system will have the ability to do that on a mass scale once the 6G is turned on.
Jeez. So, I guess it's hard to maybe answer the question, but who's behind this?
What we can say is the frequencies that we are detecting almost always go back to a group of military subcontractors and telecommunications companies. All of them are fighting for this neurotechnology. The BRAIN initiative that was instituted by President Obama was not a mistake. This was all construed and done on purpose. In 2011, I was at the Presidential Bioethics Commission under Amy Gutman, who was appointed by President Obama, who is now the ambassador to Germany at the UN. I was there with my assistant, and this was broadcasted worldwide. And they were talking about wanting to map every living organism's genome, including humans, back then. And I was allowed to ask a question, and my assistant wrote this down, and she can bear witness to this. They took a break, and my question was going to be asked next. And my question was this: I understand the importance of your experimentation, but what safeguards have you put aside for when your experimentation goes wrong? Because I already knew what was happening. We had been tracking this phenomenon early on, and I was asked to go attend that meeting. And what they did was ripped up my question. And Amy Gutman in that meeting said this, that they are the top elite 1% of the top 1% that should decide on health decisions and what should be done to our bodies, that we are too dumb to make good decisions for ourselves. That's the mentality that we're dealing with at the upper echelons, those that are in control.
I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not much of a limb, but this is one of the most mind-blowing, disturbing interviews I've ever done.
So they're saying mind control, witchcraft, and manipulation. Not of I am controlling the masses through mind control and deception. And he was showing me birds of the air, but he was also showing me land, air, and sea, and Abaddon the Destroyer. Seriatus Romate. You must pray. You must wait on me alone, my people. Seriatus Romate Sherete. Deception is at hand. It is the biggest card yet that they will play, but I will knock them down. I see nanobots in the nanobot dust from that video.
I'm wired too. I replaced 98% of my own noodle with nanotissue years ago. But mine's different. It's built to send, to transmit, whereas every other nanocell that I put out there, including the ones in your head, Cable, designed to receive. I think it, and you do it. We're talking every Slayer, everyone in Society City. I believe your better half would fall under that category, provided they're within range of my transmitters.
Very nice, Castle. So you got an army of psychotics and deviants to dance around for you.
You're thinking small, Cable, but not as small as me. See, nanocells are real small. 1,000 times smaller than these dust particulates. You inhale it, they go to work, replicating, spreading like a virus, multiplying in exponentials. 6 months' time, I could have 100 million people. Converted, ditch diggers, porn stars, and presidents. Not one would be the wiser. 100 million people who buy what I want them to buy and vote how I want them to vote. Do pretty much damn well anything I figure they ought to do. For instance,
I see artificial intelligence, AI. I hear sudden death around the world, people collapsing, and I see the towers, the 5G towers, and 6G being turned on in America. I don't know if it already is. And I hear high frequency towers, and I see the Hadron Collider, and I feel like he's saying in my spirit that these towers are connected to CERN and the Hadron Collider. Okay, he said, I'm pulling you forward. I literally see Jesus dragging me because I'm tired. I see the word exhausted. And he said, worship, and fight the good fight of faith. And drown out the noise around you. Sit, my kingdom come, my will be done on earth. I see that they're trying to bring forth the Antichrist kingdom. And I hear Babylon and the descendants of Babylon will fall. And this has been told of already. And I see giants in the land and Goliath. I see transhumanism. I see a new way of thinking. Not of I am. I see implants in the brain. And I see Elon Musk. For some reason, I hear the word husky. Okay, now I'm seeing like a white dog. I don't know if that's a husky, a husk. And Labradors. CTC, a retrieval and notices of I am. And now I hear Labrador Retriever. So I don't know if it's a pun on words. CTC hatu surumateshe. CTC. He said they're transforming my people and it's not of God. A shock is coming, a sound wave. Oh, you reminded me of Passwords, and it was like a boom. Like a wave, like as if like it looks like a heat wave type of thing, but it's just, he said a sound wave. And he said electromagnetic forces and pulsations coming your way, not of I am, and shout it down, and the electric grid. He's reminded me of those words about how he's going to turn off the electric grid to combat what the enemy is trying to do. He said in part, CTC hatu, strong magnetic forces coming your way, you must shout it down. And I see the words he gave me about going across the world shouting down demonic portals that they have been opening from CERN. They're using the electricity to come against us. And it's nanotech. High frequency. He's reminding me of DARP. Or no, that's not DARP. Is that DARP or HARP? High Aurora frequency program. Portals. They're opening portals as we speak. And he said, who's paying attention? I feel like Donald Trump knows, and I feel like they're telling him is just study and research, and that he does not understand the concept of I am. And I see robots and I hear transmission. I see frequencies coming his way that's not of God. And we need to shut that down. Donald Trump. CTC. I just seen like an explosion, like in a person. As if they're a ticking time bomb. I seen like as if nanobots in a person and they exploded. And he said a ticking time bomb indeed. And he's reminding me how Israel had that technology to send frequencies or whatever it was to those beepers they had, and it blew up on Hamas. Whoa, okay. He said this will be many in this hour. It's telling me a briefing coming forward. I feel like newer technology. I feel like this has something to do with HARP, but also possibly DARP. Ugh. He's showing me the Aurora Borealis in the air. CTC, and what are you observing? Things not of I am, and I hear translucent time indeed. Hey guys, this video is brought to you by Glory Changers. Go and check out the Glory Changer store where you can get these bracelets that say Jesus, Yeshua, Adonai. There's many different bracelets for men and women. I do pray, decree, and declare, and release the anointing over each bracelet that I make. Each bracelet is made with love, and whatever the Lord has me decree and declare onto it for the person who will receive it, because he knows all things. Glory Changers, from glory to glory. Come and check out the Glory Changer store.